When I found the note taped to my apartment door, my hands went numb before my brain could catch up. 7 words in my mother's perfect cursive. Emma's formula is in the fridge. Love. No explanation. No phone number. No return date. Just a sleeping 8-month-old baby in a car seat on my doormat, and the distant sound of a taxi pulling away into the Denver night. I stood there for what felt like an hour but was probably 30 seconds, watching Emma's chest rise and fall, her tiny fist curled against her cheek. The hallway smelled like someone's burnt dinner, and the fluorescent light buzzed overhead like it was asking me a question I couldn't answer. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. When I finally picked up the car seat, it was heavier than I expected. Not from Emma's weight but from the sudden understanding that my life had just been rewritten without my consent. That was September 15th. By October 3rd, I would become the person my family called selfish. By November, I would stand in a courtroom and explain why I refused to give her back. And by spring, I would finally understand that sometimes the cruelest thing you can do to someone is assume their love is infinite and their boundaries don't exist. My name is Jordan Blake, and if you'd asked me 3 months ago what I knew about babies, I would have laughed and told you plenty. I'm a pediatric nurse at Denver Children's Medical Center. I've held hundreds of infants. I've taught exhausted parents how to swaddle, how to read hunger cues, how to survive on 3 hours of sleep. I've inserted IVs into veins the width of thread and kept my hands steady while parents fell apart around me. I knew babies. What I didn't know is how different it feels when you can't hand them back at the end of your shift. When there's no parent coming through the door to reclaim their child. When the crying at 2 in the morning is your problem and yours alone because the people who should be handling it are sipping Mai Tais 4,000 miles away. The night I found Emma, I brought her inside and set the car seat on my kitchen counter like she was groceries I needed to unpack. My apartment in Capitol Hill is small. A 2-bedroom I'd been using as a 1-bedroom with an office. The second room had a desk, a yoga mat I hadn't touched in 6 months, and boxes of textbooks from nursing school I kept meaning to donate. It did not have a crib. It did not have a changing table. It did not have anything remotely prepared for an infant. I looked at Emma, still sleeping, her impossibly long eyelashes casting shadows on her cheeks. She had my brother Tyler's nose, unfortunately. The same slightly crooked angle that made him look perpetually like he was about to sneeze. But her eyes, when they were open, were bright blue. Nothing like anyone in our family. Those came from Vanessa, the woman who'd given birth to Emma and then vanished 6 months ago like smoke. I called my mother first. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. Her voice was cheerful, recorded probably on a beach somewhere. Hi, you've reached Patricia Blake. I'm currently enjoying island time and will return your call when I can. Aloha. I didn't leave a message. I called my father. Same thing. Voicemail. His was shorter. Robert Blake. Leave a message. The beep felt like an accusation. I tried Tyler next, my older brother, Emma's actual father. The number was disconnected. Of course it was. Tyler's phone numbers had a lifespan of about 3 months before he'd skip out on the bill and get a new one. I'd lost count of how many numbers I'd saved in my phone with his name attached. I opened the note again, smoothing it against the counter. My mother's handwriting was immaculate as always, each letter perfectly formed like she was addressing a wedding invitation. On the back, in smaller text, I found something I'd missed. We know you'll do the right thing. She's family. That last word felt like a hand pushing down on my shoulders. Family. The word we'd used my entire life to justify everything. To explain why I drove Tyler to rehab twice. Why I co-signed for his apartment in Phoenix last year. The one he got evicted from 3 months later. Why I wired him $500 when he called from some town in New Mexico claiming he needed it for car repairs. Family meant you showed up. Family meant you fixed things. Family meant you swallowed your exhaustion and frustration and did what needed doing because that's what good people did. Emma woke up at midnight. Her cry started soft, a little whimper that built into a full-scale wail within seconds. I'd been sitting on my couch, staring at the car seat trying to figure out what to do. The sound of her crying activated something automatic in me. I unbuckled her, lifted her out, and held her against my chest the way I'd done 1,000 times at work. She was warm and solid and smelled like baby lotion and something else, something sour. I checked her diaper. Soaked through. Of course. I didn't have diapers. I checked the diaper bag my mother had left. A floral print thing that looked like it came from a thrift store. Inside I found 3 diapers, half a container of wipes, 2 bottles, and a can of formula. 3 diapers. For an 8-month-old. My mother had left her granddaughter with enough supplies for maybe 24 hours if I was lucky. I changed Emma on my bed using a towel. I'd never be able to look at the same way again. She stopped crying and looked up at me with those huge blue eyes, and I felt something crack open in my chest that I immediately tried to seal shut. I couldn't afford to feel tender toward her. Tenderness meant attachment. Attachment meant I'd already lost. I made a bottle using the instructions on the formula can, tested the temperature on my wrist like I'd shown parents how to do hundreds of times, and fed her while sitting on the edge of my bed. She drank it efficiently, her little hand reaching up to touch my face. When she finished, she let out a satisfied sigh and fell asleep in my arms within minutes. I sat there holding her, watching the Denver skyline through my window, the mountains just visible in the darkness beyond the city lights. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. Finally. Thank you, sweetheart. We knew we could count on you. Dad and I needed this time. We've given 30 years to this family. Emma will be fine with you for a few weeks. You're so good with children. Few weeks. I read it 3 times. Few weeks. Not a few days. Not an emergency overnight. Weeks. I looked down at Emma, her mouth slightly open, her breathing deep and even. I typed back with one hand. You can't just leave her with me. I have a job. I have a life. Where's Tyler? The response came fast. Tyler is handling some things. We'll explain everything when we're back. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be. She's your niece. Just love her. Just love her. As if love was the only ingredient required. As if love paid for daycare or made my 12-hour hospital shifts disappear. As if love was enough to make me forget that this was abandonment dressed up in family obligation. I set my phone face down on the nightstand and tried to figure out where Emma was going to sleep. I couldn't put her back in the car seat all night. I didn't have a crib. After 20 minutes of panicking, I emptied out my bottom dresser drawer, lined it with blankets, and placed it on the floor next to my bed. I laid Emma inside carefully. She didn't wake. I set an alarm for 2 hours, knowing she'd probably need another bottle, and lay down in my clothes. Sleep felt impossible, but somehow it came anyway. Heavy and dreamless. The next morning I called out sick from work for the first time in 2 years. My supervisor, Dr. Walsh, was understanding but concerned. Jordan, you never call out. Are you all right? I told him I had a family emergency. It wasn't a lie. He told me to take care of myself and let him know if I needed more time. I hung up and looked around my apartment. Emma was awake, babbling to herself in the drawer, kicking her legs. She seemed remarkably unbothered by her circumstances. I wished I could say the same. I spent that day in survival mode. I walked to the Target 4 blocks away with Emma strapped to my chest in a baby carrier I found in the diaper bag, bought diapers and formula and baby food and wipes, and spent $200 I hadn't planned on spending. I bought a pack and play that I assembled wrong twice before finally getting it right. I cleared out the yoga mat and boxes from my second bedroom and set the pack and play up in there, though Emma seemed to prefer sleeping in my room anyway. By day 3, I'd fallen into a rhythm. Wake up at 6 when Emma woke up. Feed her. Change her. Try to get her to play independently while I showered. Fail. Shower with the bathroom door open while she cried in the pack and play. Feel guilty. Pick her up. Try again. My best friend Nina called that afternoon. Nina and I had gone through nursing school together and now worked in the same unit at the hospital. She had 3 kids of her own, and the kind of energy that made you wonder if she was secretly powered by something other than caffeine. Jordan, what's going on? She asked. Dr. Walsh said you've been out all week. That's not like you. I told her everything. The note. My parents. Hawaii. Tyler. Emma. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. When I finished, there was a long silence. Jordan, Nina said slowly, they just left her with you? Without asking. I laughed and it came out bitter. They asked by assuming I'd say yes. Nina made a noise of disgust. That's not asking. That's manipulating. What are you going to do? I looked at Emma, who was on a blanket on the floor, trying to grab her own feet. I don't know, I said honestly. I guess I take care of her until they come back. But here's the thing about temporary situations. They have a way of becoming permanent when nobody's willing to name them for what they are. By the end of week 1, I'd used up all my sick days. By week 2, I'd arranged intermittent FMLA leave, which meant I could work part-time without losing my job, but it also meant my paychecks were cut in half. I'd gone through my savings account like water. Diapers, formula, baby food, a real crib because Emma had outgrown the pack-and-play's weight limit. I had to buy a car seat that actually fit her because the one my parents left was for a newborn. I paid for a background-checked babysitter named Mrs. Henderson from down the hall, a retired teacher who charged $20 an hour. My life had become a series of calculations. How many hours could I work before the babysitting costs outweighed my paycheck? How many times could I text my mother before it became clear she was ignoring me on purpose? The answer to that last question was 11. I texted my mother 11 times over 3 weeks. She responded to 2. The first response: everything's fine. Enjoy this time with Emma. Babies grow so fast. The second: we'll be home soon. Trust us. Soon. That word without meaning. Soon could be tomorrow. Soon could be 6 months. I called the Honolulu number my dad had texted from once. A hotel receptionist answered. I asked for Robert Blake's room. She put me through. It rang and rang. No answer. I asked when he'd checked out. She couldn't give me that information. Privacy policy. I wanted to scream into the phone that privacy policies didn't apply when someone abandoned their grandchild, but I didn't. I thanked her and hung up. October 3rd started like any other morning in my new temporary permanent life. Emma woke up at 5:45. I changed her, made her bottle, fed her while half asleep on the couch. The sun was just starting to rise over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. My balcony door was open slightly, letting in the cool autumn air. Denver in October smells like wood smoke and dry leaves, a scent I'd always loved. That morning it just smelled like exhaustion. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Is this Jordan Blake? A woman's voice asked. Professional. Clipped. Yes, I said, wary. This is Linda Ramirez from Colorado Child Protective Services. I'm calling regarding Emma Blake. We received a report that an 8-month-old child has been left in your care without proper legal guardianship documentation. Is that accurate? The world tilted. I looked at Emma, who was chewing on a teething ring, oblivious. Who called you? I asked. I can't disclose that information, Ms. Ramirez said. But I need to verify the child's current living situation. Are you Emma Blake's legal guardian? I wasn't. I had no paperwork. No custody agreement. No power of attorney. Nothing. I was just an aunt who'd found a baby on her doorstep and made the mistake of keeping her alive. Her father is my brother, I said carefully. Her grandparents left her with me temporarily while they're traveling. It's a family arrangement. Ms. Ramirez made a sound like she was writing something down. And where is the child's father now? I didn't know. I hadn't known for weeks. He's in Arizona, I lied. Phoenix. He's working. Another note being written. Ms. Blake, I'm going to need to schedule a home visit. Are you available tomorrow at 10? I wasn't. I was scheduled for a shift. But I said yes anyway because what else could I say? After I hung up, I sat very still. Emma had pulled herself up using the coffee table and was standing there, bouncing slightly, proud of herself. She just learned to do that 2 days ago. I'd been there for it. I'd watched her figure out how to grip the edge, how to pull, how to balance. I cheered for her. I'd taken a video. And now someone had called CPS because I was caring for her without the right forms, the right signatures, the right legal permission from people who'd abandoned her without a second thought. I called Nina. She answered on the first ring. Someone called CPS on me, I said. My voice sounded strange, far away. Nina swore, colorful and creative. Who would do that? I thought about it. My apartment building had thin walls. Mrs. Henderson knew Emma wasn't mine. My neighbors had probably heard her crying at odd hours, had seen me struggling to get a stroller down the stairs, had noticed I suddenly had an infant without ever being pregnant. Any one of them could have called. Or maybe it was someone from the hospital. I'd mentioned the situation to a few people. Word traveled fast in a place like that. It doesn't matter who, I said finally. What matters is they're coming tomorrow. They're going to see that I have no legal right to have her. And then what? Do they take her? Put her in foster care? Nina was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was gentle. Jordan, maybe this is the wake-up call your parents need. Maybe this forces them to come home and actually take responsibility. I wanted to believe that. But I'd spent 28 years watching my parents dodge responsibility when it came to Tyler. When he got arrested at 19 for possession, they paid for a lawyer but told him he needed to figure his life out. When he dropped out of college after one semester, they said they couldn't force him to succeed. When Vanessa got pregnant and Tyler swore he'd step up, they nodded and said they hoped so. Hope wasn't a plan. It was just wishful thinking with better PR. Ms. Ramirez arrived at 10 the next morning exactly. She was younger than I expected, maybe mid-30s, with dark hair pulled back in a bun and eyes that looked like they'd seen too much. She wore slacks and a cardigan despite the warm day, and carried a leather folder. I'd spent the previous evening cleaning my apartment like my life depended on it, which maybe it did. Emma was in a clean outfit. The crib was made. The bottles were washed and lined up on a drying rack. I'd even bought fresh flowers for the kitchen table, which felt absurd but somehow necessary. Ms. Ramirez introduced herself, shook my hand, and asked if she could come in. I stepped aside. She walked through my apartment slowly, looking at everything. The pack and play in the living room. The high chair I'd bought secondhand. The diaper changing station I'd set up on top of my dresser. She picked up one of Emma's toys, a soft rabbit, and examined it before setting it down. How long has Emma been in your care? She asked. I told her. For weeks. She wrote that down. And you have no legal guardianship paperwork. It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. No. My parents dropped her off and left for Hawaii. They said it would be temporary. A few weeks. Ms. Ramirez looked at me. Did you agree to this arrangement? I thought about that question. Had I agreed? Or had I simply failed to say no? I opened my mouth to answer Ms. Ramirez, but the words tangled somewhere between my throat and my brain. Had I agreed? The question seemed simple on the surface, but underneath it was a maze of family history, unspoken expectations, and the kind of guilt that gets woven into your DNA when you're raised to believe that saying no to family makes you selfish. Emma was playing on the floor between us, stacking soft blocks that immediately fell over, making her laugh each time. That sound, that pure unbridled joy at repetition and gravity, felt like an accusation and a defense all at once. I didn't refuse, I said finally, which wasn't the same as saying yes but was apparently close enough for my parents. Ms. Ramirez wrote something in her folder that I couldn't see. Ms. Blake, I need you to understand the situation clearly. Without legal guardianship documentation, you're technically harboring a child without parental consent. If the parents filed a report tomorrow claiming you took their grandchild without permission, you could face serious consequences. The irony was so thick I could taste it. They could abandon Emma on my doorstep and walk away to paradise, but somehow I was the one at legal risk for keeping her fed and safe. What about them? I asked, hearing my voice rise despite my best efforts to stay calm. What about my parents who left her here without asking? What about my brother who's been completely absent from her life? Why am I the one being investigated? Ms. Ramirez's expression softened slightly, just around the edges. I understand your frustration. Unfortunately, family arrangements like this fall into a gray area, unless someone files a formal complaint about neglect or abandonment. Right now, no one has done that. She paused, watching Emma try to fit a square block through a circular hole. Have you considered filing such a complaint? The question hung in the air like smoke. Filing a complaint against my own parents. Against Tyler. Making this official. Making it public. Turning a private family mess into a matter of state record. Every cell in my body that had been trained to protect family reputation, to keep things quiet, to handle it ourselves, screamed no. But there was another part of me, smaller but growing louder each day, That whispered, "What choice do you have?" "If I did that," I said slowly, "what would happen to Emma?" Ms. Ramirez sat down on my couch, uninvited but somehow not unwelcome. She set her folder on the coffee table and folded her hands. "Several possibilities. If your parents can be located and contacted, they'd be required to return and establish care or formally delegate guardianship. If they refuse or can't be reached, and if your brother is also unavailable, Emma could be placed in emergency foster care while the situation is resolved. Or, if you're willing and pass a background check and home study, you could potentially be approved as a kinship foster placement." Foster care. The words made my stomach clench. I'd seen foster kids come through the hospital. Some were with wonderful families who loved them. Others cycled through homes like they were temporary storage units. Emma was 8 months old. She recognized me now. When I came home from work, her whole face lit up. She reached for me. She called me Mama even though I tried so hard not to let her, tried to redirect her to saying my name, but babies don't understand the politics of caregiving. To her, I was the person who showed up. That made me Mama. The thought of her being taken away, placed with strangers, crying for someone familiar who wouldn't come, it physically hurt. "How long does a home study take?" I asked. Ms. Ramirez's expression told me she'd expected this question. "Typically 6 to 8 weeks. Background check, fingerprinting, home inspection, interviews, reference checks. It's thorough." 6 to 8 weeks. Emma would be nearly 10 months old by then. Walking probably. Saying more words. Growing and changing in ways I wouldn't see if they took her away during the process. And if I don't file a complaint? If I just keep doing what I'm doing? Ms. Ramirez picked up her folder again, signaling the official part of the conversation was resuming. "Then you're taking a significant risk. If something happens to Emma while she's in your undocumented care, you could be held liable. If your parents decide they want her back suddenly and you refuse, you have no legal standing. If your brother resurfaces and wants to take her, same thing. You'd have no rights." No rights. I already had no rights and didn't realize it. I'd been living in an illusion, thinking that biology and love and showing up every day meant something. But without paperwork, without signatures and court orders and official stamps, I was just a temporary placeholder. Easily dismissed. Easily replaced. Easily blamed. Ms. Ramirez stood up. "I'm going to give you my card. Think about what you want to do. But Ms. Blake, I need to be clear. If I receive another call about this situation, I'll have to open a formal investigation. It won't be optional anymore. Right now, you have some control over how this unfolds. That window won't stay open forever." She handed me her card. Linda Ramirez, Child Protective Services Specialist. A phone number. An email address. A decision disguised as contact information. After she left, I sat on the floor next to Emma. She immediately crawled into my lap, something she'd started doing recently when she wanted comfort or was tired. I wrapped my arms around her and breathed in the smell of her hair, that particular baby scent of shampoo and milk, and something indefinably sweet. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. Finally. After days of silence. "Jordan, we heard someone called CPS. This is so embarrassing. Please handle it. We trust you. We'll be home by Thanksgiving." Thanksgiving. It was October 5th. Thanksgiving was 7 weeks away. 7 more weeks of my life on hold. 7 more weeks of have paychecks and emergency babysitting and sleepless nights. 7 more weeks of Emma getting attached to me, of me getting attached to her, of this temporary situation calcifying into something that would hurt exponentially more when they finally decided to reclaim her. I stared at that message until the screen went dark. "Please handle it." As if this was a minor inconvenience. As if I hadn't already been handling it for a month. As if handling it wasn't costing me everything. I called Nina. She answered with her usual chaos in the background. Kids yelling, a dog barking, a timer going off. "Talk to me," she said. I told her about Ms. Ramirez. About the options. About my mother's text. When I finished, Nina was quiet, which was unusual for her. "You know what you have to do," she finally said. "Do I?" My voice came out smaller than I intended. "Jordan, listen to me. I love you. You're one of the best people I know. But your family has been taking advantage of that goodness your entire life. They know you won't fight back. They know you'll sacrifice yourself. and they're banking on it again. She paused. But this time it's not just about you. It's about Emma. And Emma deserves better than being a bargaining chip in your family's dysfunction. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed listening to Emma breathe through the baby monitor, that soft rhythmic sound that had become my constant background noise. I thought about all the times I'd covered for Tyler. The time I told our parents I'd loaned him money when really he'd stolen it from my wallet. The time I said his black eye was from a bar fight when really it was from a drug deal gone wrong. The time I picked him up from a police station at 3 in the morning and never mentioned it to anyone. I'd spent my whole life being the good one, the reliable one, the one who cleaned up messes. And what had it gotten me? A reputation for being convenient. My father called the next morning. It was the first time I'd heard his voice in over a month. "Jordan, sweetheart. Your mother told me about the CPS situation. That's unfortunate." Unfortunate. Like it was bad weather. Bad luck. Not a direct consequence of their choices. "Dad, you left Emma with me without asking. You've been gone a month. CPS didn't call themselves." He sighed, that particular sigh he used when he wanted you to know you were being difficult. "We thought you'd enjoy the time with her. You're always saying you want kids someday. This is good practice." Good practice. I closed my eyes and counted to 5. Practice requires consent. You can't just drop a baby off and disappear. "Where's Tyler?" Another sigh. "Tyler is working through some things. He's not ready to be a father right now. We're giving him space to figure it out." Space. That generous word we used to describe running away. "So your solution was to make me her parent without asking if I was ready?" I heard the sharpness in my voice but couldn't pull it back. My father's tone shifted, cooling. "Jordan, we've always been able to count on you. Don't let us down now. Emma is family. Family takes care of family. You know that." There it was again. That word. Family. Used like a weapon. Used like a debt I owed. Used like a cage with the door left open just enough to make me think I had a choice. "When are you coming home?" I asked. "Thanksgiving," he said, as if it was already decided. "We'll figure everything out then. In the meantime, just take care of her. You're doing great." He hung up before I could respond. I stood there holding my phone, feeling something I'd never quite felt toward my parents before. Not anger exactly. Anger was hot and explosive. This was colder, clearer. This was recognition. They weren't going to change. They weren't going to suddenly become responsible. They were going to keep doing exactly what they'd always done, and I was going to keep enabling it unless I made a different choice. I looked at Ms. Ramirez's card still sitting on my kitchen counter where I'd left it. I thought about Emma, 9 months of life, none of which she'd asked for. She hadn't chosen Tyler as a father. She hadn't chosen Vanessa as a mother. She hadn't chosen grandparents who treated her like an inconvenience. She hadn't chosen any of this. But I could choose what happened next. I picked up my phone and called Nina. "I need you to watch Emma tonight. I have something I need to do." 2 hours later, I was sitting in a small office at Legal Aid of Denver. The lawyer's name was David Hoffman, and he had the kind face of someone who'd heard 1,000 sad stories and still managed to care about each one. I told him everything. The note on my door. My parents in Hawaii. Tyler's disconnected phone. The CPS visit. The month of my life spent in limbo. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and steepled his fingers. "Ms. Blake, what you're describing is child abandonment. Your parents left a minor in your care without establishing legal guardianship, without providing adequate support, and without a clear return date. That's textbook neglect." Neglect. Hearing it named made it real. Made it something other than family drama. Made it something the law could address. "What can I do?" I asked. David pulled out a legal pad and started making notes. Several options. You could file for emergency temporary guardianship, which would give you legal authority to make decisions for Emma while the situation is resolved. You could file a child welfare report formally documenting the abandonment, which would trigger an investigation. Or you could petition for full custody, though that's a longer process. He looked up at me. "The question is, what do you want? Do you want to protect yourself legally while your parents are gone? Or do you want to protect Emma long term?" I hadn't let myself think about long term. Long-term required admitting that this might not be temporary. Long-term required admitting that Emma might not have anyone else. Long-term required admitting that I'd already made a choice the moment I brought her inside instead of calling the police that first night. I want to do what's best for Emma, I said. David nodded like he'd expected that answer. Then we start with emergency temporary guardianship and a formal child welfare report that establishes the facts, protects you legally, and puts your parents on notice that they can't just abandon their responsibilities. It also starts a paper trail if you need to pursue custody later. He slid a stack of forms across the desk. This will require documentation. The note they left. Text messages. Proof of your expenses caring for Emma. Any communication where they acknowledged leaving her with you. Do you have all that? I did. I'd saved everything, not because I planned to use it, but because some instinct told me I might need it. Every text from my mother. Photos of the note. Receipts for diapers and formula and babysitting. My bank statements showing the hemorrhage of my savings. My work schedule showing the hours I'd lost. I had documentation for a case I didn't know I was building. I'll need a few days to prepare everything, David said. Once we file, things will move quickly. Your parents will be notified. There will be a hearing. You'll need to testify about what happened. Are you prepared for that? Was I prepared to stand up in public and detail my family's dysfunction? Was I prepared to face my parents in a courtroom? Was I prepared for my mother's tears and my father's disappointment and Tyler's inevitable anger if he ever resurfaced? Was I prepared to become the villain in my family's story? I thought about Emma, about the way she smiled when I sang to her, about how she'd learned to wave bye-bye last week, about how she slept better when I put my hand on her back, about how she trusted me completely because I was the one who showed up. Yes, I said. I'm prepared. The next week was a blur of paperwork and preparation. David filed for emergency temporary guardianship and submitted a formal child welfare report to CPS. Within 48 hours, I received a court date. November 12th. The same day Emma would turn 9 months old. The universe had a terrible sense of timing. Ms. Ramirez called to inform me that an investigation had been opened. She'd attempted to contact my parents at the hotel in Hawaii, but they checked out. She tried the phone numbers I provided. Both went to voicemail. She'd attempted to locate Tyler through his last known address in Phoenix. The apartment complex confirmed he'd been evicted in August. No forwarding address. My family had effectively vanished, leaving me holding the evidence of their negligence. At work, people started asking questions. My schedule had been so erratic that rumors were spreading. Some people thought I was sick. Others thought I was having a breakdown. A few knew about Emma but didn't understand the details. During a shift break, I ran into Dr. Walsh in the staff lounge. He poured himself coffee and sat across from me with that concerned supervisor expression I'd seen 100 times. Jordan, I need to know if you're okay. Your performance hasn't slipped, but your availability has. If something's going on, I need to know so I can help. I told him. Not everything, but enough. My parents' abandonment. The baby I was suddenly responsible for. The upcoming court case. He listened without interrupting, and when I finished, he set down his coffee cup carefully. Jordan, why didn't you tell me sooner? We have resources. Emergency leave. Support programs. You didn't have to handle this alone. But I did have to handle it alone. That was the point. That's what I'd been trained to do. Handling things alone was my role. Asking for help felt like admitting failure. I'm telling you now, I said. Dr. Walsh nodded slowly. Okay, here's what we're going to do. I'm approving you for extended family leave under FMLA. 12 weeks partial pay. That should get you through the court process and whatever comes after. And Jordan, when this is over, when you're ready, your position will be waiting. You're one of our best nurses. We don't want to lose you. I felt something crack in my chest. Gratitude maybe. Or relief. Or just the overwhelming sensation of someone seeing me struggle and offering a hand instead of judgment. Thank you, I managed. He stood up, squeezed my shoulder briefly, and left me alone with my cold coffee and the weight of everything still ahead. That night, I sat down and wrote an email to my parents. I tried calling multiple times with no answer. I texted with no real response. This was my last attempt at communication before the court summons arrived. I wrote it carefully, trying to find the balance between honesty and respect, between setting boundaries and burning bridges. Mom and Dad, I need you to understand what's happening. Emma has been with me for 6 weeks. In that time, I've spent over $4,000 of my own savings. I've reduced my work hours by 60%. I've lost sleep, rearranged my entire life, and put my career on hold. I did this because you left me no choice and because Emma deserves to be cared for. But I cannot continue like this indefinitely. I've filed for emergency temporary guardianship. There will be a court hearing on November 12th. You'll receive official notice. I need you to come home and take responsibility, either by caring for Emma yourselves or by working with me to establish a legal arrangement. I'm not doing this to hurt you. I'm doing this to protect Emma and myself. Please understand that this is necessary. Love, Jordan. I read it 3 times before sending. It felt simultaneously too harsh and not harsh enough. I hit send before I could second-guess myself further. The response came 2 days later. Just one line from my mother. How could you do this to us? Not how could you be put in this position? Not we're sorry. Not we'll come home. Just accusation. Just the suggestion that I was the problem. I didn't respond. What was there to say? October bled into November. Emma learned to pull herself up on furniture and cruise along the couch. She started saying BABA for bottle and oh every time she dropped something, which was constantly. She developed a love for sweet potatoes and a hatred of green beans. She laughed when I made funny faces and cried when I left her line of sight. She was becoming a person with preferences and personality and opinions. And I was becoming someone I didn't entirely recognize. The person who could rock her to sleep at 2 in the morning while barely conscious. The person who could change a diaper one-handed while holding a phone. The person who sang the same lullaby 40 times in a row because it was the only thing that worked. The person who took 10,000 photos because every moment felt impossibly fleeting. The person who loved this child so fiercely it scared me. On November 11th, the night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I'd arranged for Mrs. Henderson to watch Emma during the court appearance. I'd picked out professional clothes that still fit despite the stress weight I'd lost. I'd reviewed my testimony with David 3 times. I was as prepared as I could be. But preparation didn't stop the anxiety that crawled under my skin like electricity. Nina came over around 10 with a bottle of wine and a pep talk. You're doing the right thing, she said, pouring us each a glass. I know it doesn't feel like it. I know it feels like you're betraying your family. But Jordan, they betrayed you first. They betrayed Emma. You're just finally standing up and naming it. I sipped the wine. It tasted expensive, which meant Nina had splurged. What if I'm wrong? I asked. What if I'm overreacting? What if they come back and everything could have been fine if I just waited? Nina set down her glass and took my hands. Listen to me. You waited 6 weeks. 6 weeks of silence and excuses and empty promises. That's not a vacation. That's abandonment. And even if they come back tomorrow, that doesn't erase what they did. It doesn't erase that they were willing to leave Emma indefinitely. It doesn't erase that they prioritized their comfort over her safety. She was right. I knew she was right. But knowing something intellectually and feeling it emotionally are different countries separated by an ocean. I'm scared, I admitted. Nina squeezed my hands. Good. Being scared means you understand what's at stake. But you're also brave. And tomorrow you're going to walk into that courtroom and tell the truth. And whatever happens after that, you'll handle it. Because that's what you do. After Nina left, I checked on Emma one last time. She was sleeping on her back, arms thrown above her head in that total surrender way babies sleep. I watched her chest rise and fall and made a promise I wasn't sure I could keep. Whatever happens tomorrow, I whispered, I'll make sure you're safe. Even if it costs me everything. The Denver County Family Court building looked exactly like bureaucracy feels. Gray concrete, narrow windows, and fluorescent lighting that made everyone look slightly ill. I arrived 30 minutes early because anxiety has always made me compulsively punctual. David Hoffman was already there, standing near the security checkpoint with his briefcase, and that calm professional demeanor that lawyers must practice in front of mirrors. He nodded when he saw me, and we went through security together, placing our bags on the conveyor belt, walking through the metal detector, reclaiming our belongings on the other side like we were preparing for battle with paperwork as our weapons. The waiting area outside courtroom 3 was full of people with their own family crises, their own impossible situations. A woman in her 60s clutched a tissue and stared at nothing. A young couple argued in whispers that weren't quite whispers. A man in a suit that had seen better days typed frantically on his phone. Everyone looked exhausted in that specific way that comes from fighting systems designed to move slowly while your life falls apart quickly. David and I sat in hard plastic chairs that were definitely designed to prevent comfort. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder thick with documents. "I spoke with the judge's clerk this morning," he said quietly. "Your parents received the summons. We have confirmation of delivery to their hotel in Hawaii 3 days ago." My stomach clenched. "Are they here?" David shook his head. "Not yet. But the hearing doesn't start for another 20 minutes. I watched the door like I was waiting for an exam I hadn't studied for. Every time someone entered, my heart rate spiked. But it was never them. Never my mother with her perfect posture and disappointed eyes. Never my father with his to make silence feel like judgment. The minutes crawled by with the speed of continental drift. At 9:55, David stood. "It's time." The courtroom was smaller than I expected. More like a large office than the dramatic spaces you see on television. Wood paneling that had gone dark with age. A judge's bench that wasn't particularly imposing. A court reporter's station. A few rows of seats for observers. The air smelled like old paper and industrial cleaner. We sat at one of 2 tables facing the bench. The other table remained empty. At exactly 10 o'clock, the bailiff announced Judge Catherine Morrison, and we all stood. Judge Morrison was perhaps 60, with steel gray hair cut efficiently short and reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. She settled into her seat with the air of someone who'd seen every variation of human mess, and had stopped being surprised decades ago. She opened the file in front of her, scanned it briefly, then looked up. "This is case number 24-7392, Blake vs. Blake, petition for emergency temporary guardianship. I see the petitioner and her counsel are present. Is there anyone here representing the respondents, Robert and Patricia Blake?" Silence. Judge Morrison looked at the empty table, then at the bailiff. "Have the respondents been properly served?" The bailiff confirmed they had been. Judge Morrison made a note. "Very well. We'll proceed. Mr. Hoffman, you may present your case." David stood and buttoned his suit jacket in one smooth motion. "Thank you, Your Honor. My client Jordan Blake is petitioning for emergency temporary guardianship of her infant niece Emma Blake, who is 8 months old. On September 15th of this year, the child was left in Ms. Blake's care by her parents, Robert and Patricia Blake, without prior consent, without legal documentation, and without adequate resources. The respondents then departed for Hawaii and have remained there for nearly 8 weeks despite multiple attempts at contact." He laid out the facts with the precision of someone building a structure from evidence. The note left on my door. The text messages. The financial records showing my expenses. The CPS report. My employment records showing the impact on my career. Tyler's absence and whereabouts unknown. Vanessa's complete disappearance from Emma's life. Each piece of evidence was a brick, and together they formed a wall of undeniable neglect. Judge Morrison listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes. When David finished, she turned to me. "Ms. Blake, I'd like to hear from you directly. Can you describe for me what happened on September 15th? I stood, my legs less steady than I wanted them to be. I'd rehearsed this. I'd practiced in front of Nina, in front of my bathroom mirror, in my head while feeding Emma at 3 in the morning. But standing in that courtroom with the judge looking at me expectantly made every prepared word evaporate. I started with the simple truth. I came home from a 12-hour shift at the hospital. I'm a pediatric nurse. It was around 8:30 in the evening. There was a note taped to my door and a car seat on my doormat with my niece inside. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, too loud in the quiet courtroom. "What did the note say?" Judge Morrison asked. I brought it with me. David had it in his folder as evidence, but I'd also kept the original, folded carefully in my wallet like people keep photos of loved ones. I pulled it out now, unfolded it, and read my mother's handwriting. "Emma's formula is in the fridge. Love." Judge Morrison raised her eyebrows slightly. That's all. I nodded. There was more on the back. It said, "We know you'll do the right thing. She's family." The judge made another note. Had you agreed to care for Emma prior to this? This was the question I'd been dreading. The question that made me feel complicit. No, Your Honor. I'd spoken to my mother a few days earlier. She mentioned they were planning a trip and asked if I could help with Emma. I told her I was working and couldn't take time off. She said she understood. Then she left Emma anyway. Judge Morrison leaned forward slightly. And you didn't call the police? Didn't immediately contact Child Protective Services? I felt heat rise to my face. No, Your Honor. She was my niece. She was 8 months old. I couldn't just let her be taken by strangers. I thought my parents would come back in a few days. I thought it was a misunderstanding. Even as I said it, I heard how naive it sounded. Judge Morrison's expression didn't change. When did you realize it wasn't a misunderstanding? I thought about that question. When had I known? Maybe a week in, when my mother texted that they'd be gone for a few weeks. Or maybe when I called the hotel and they'd stopped answering. Or maybe the moment I saw that note. And something in me already knew they weren't planning to come back anytime soon. The judge nodded slowly. Tell me about the impact this has had on your life. This part was easier because it was just facts. Numbers. Concrete things. I've spent over $4,000 of my savings on Emma's care. Diapers, formula, clothing, a crib, car seat, medical supplies. I've cut my work hours by more than half because I can't afford full-time childcare on a nurse's salary while also covering all of Emma's expenses. I've used all my sick time and vacation time. I'm currently on partial FMLA leave. My apartment wasn't set up for an infant. I've had to completely reorganize my life. Judge Morrison was writing quickly. And have your parents provided any financial support during this time? I almost laughed. No, Your Honor. Nothing. David stood again. Your Honor, if I may, we have documentation showing that Ms. Blake has attempted to contact her parents 47 times over the past 8 weeks. Calls, texts, emails. She's received minimal response, mostly deflections and reassurances that they'll be home soon without any concrete dates. The judge looked at the evidence David was referencing. The silence stretched long enough that I could hear the clock on the wall ticking. Finally, Judge Morrison looked up. Where is the child's father in all this? David and I exchanged a glance. Tyler Blake is my older brother, I said. He's had minimal involvement in Emma's life since her birth. Her mother, Vanessa Moore, left when Emma was 2 months old. Tyler's been in and out of contact. His last known address was in Phoenix, but he was evicted. His phone is disconnected. I don't know where he is. Judge Morrison removed her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. So we have an infant whose father is missing, whose mother is absent, and whose grandparents have effectively abandoned her with an aunt who never agreed to be her caregiver. Is that accurate? Hearing it summarized like that made it sound even worse. Yes, Your Honor. The judge put her glasses back on and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Ms. Blake, I'm going to ask you a difficult question, and I need you to answer honestly. Why didn't you refuse? Why didn't you call the police that first night, report the abandonment, and let the system handle it? This was the question underneath all the other questions. The question I'd asked myself 100 times. Because she's 8 months old, and she didn't do anything wrong. Because I'm a pediatric nurse, and I know what the foster system can be like. Because I kept thinking my parents would realize what they'd done and come back. Because she's my niece, and some part of me thought family meant something. My voice cracked on that last word. And because the moment I picked up that car seat and brought her inside, I'd already made a choice. I just didn't realize it yet. Judge Morrison was quiet for a long moment. Then she looked at the empty table where my parents should have been sitting. The respondents chose not to appear today despite being properly served. That speaks volumes. However, I need to consider all options before making a ruling. Mr. Hoffman, what specifically is your client requesting? David stood again. Emergency temporary guardianship, Your Honor. My client needs legal authority to make medical, educational, and day-to-day decisions for Emma while the respondents are absent. She needs protection from liability. And she needs formal recognition that she has been acting as Emma's primary caregiver without support or assistance. Judge Morrison nodded. I'm going to take a brief recess to review the evidence. 30 minutes. Please remain available. She stood, and we all stood with her as she exited through a door behind the bench. The moment she was gone, I felt my legs go weak. David put a hand on my shoulder. You did well. Your testimony was clear and credible. I sat down heavily. She thinks I'm an idiot for not calling the police immediately. David sat beside me. She thinks you made a compassionate choice in an impossible situation. There's a difference. We waited in the hallway. I texted Mrs. Henderson to check on Emma. She sent back a photo of Emma eating Cheerios one at a time, carefully pinching each one between her thumb and forefinger. That tiny focused expression on her face made my chest ache. What was I doing? Was I helping her or making everything worse? Was I protecting her or being selfish? The questions spiraled until Nina's words from the night before cut through them. You're doing the right thing, even when the right thing feels terrible. At 10:45, the bailiff called us back in. Judge Morrison was already at the bench, her expression unreadable. We took our seats. She looked at me directly. Miss Blake, I've reviewed all the evidence presented. I've considered the testimony. I've noted the absence of the respondents. This is a deeply troubling situation. A child has been abandoned, effectively if not legally, by multiple adults who should have been responsible for her care. You were put in an impossible position without your consent. She paused and I stopped breathing. However, despite that impossibility, you have provided consistent, appropriate care for your niece for 2 months. You've sacrificed financially, professionally, and personally. The child is safe, healthy, and by all accounts thriving in your care. Another pause. I gripped the edge of the table. Therefore, I'm granting your petition for emergency temporary guardianship. This order gives you full legal authority to care for Emma, make decisions on her behalf, and act as her guardian until further order of this court. The respondents, Robert and Patricia Blake, will be required to appear at a follow-up hearing in 60 days to address their abandonment of the child and determine long-term custody arrangements. Additionally, I'm ordering that a child welfare investigation be opened to locate Tyler Blake and assess his fitness as a parent. She signed the order with efficient strokes. Ms. Blake, this is temporary. It's designed to protect you and Emma while the larger issues are resolved. Do you understand? I managed to say yes, though my voice felt distant. The respondents will be notified of this order and the next hearing date. If they fail to appear again, I'll consider that in any future custody determinations. Mr. Hoffman, please ensure your client receives certified copies of this order. David thanked the judge. I tried to stand and found my legs unsteady. David caught my elbow. Judge Morrison looked at me one more time before ending the session. Ms. Blake, what you've done takes courage. Not everyone would have stepped up. But please understand, this situation is far from resolved. Your parents may contest this. Your brother may resurface. There are difficult conversations ahead. I suggest you prepare yourself. Then she was gone and it was over. I'd won. Sort of. I had legal guardianship. I had protection. I had authority. But I also had confirmed what I already knew. My family had abandoned Emma. The court had named it officially. There was no going back from that truth. No pretending it was a misunderstanding or a temporary lapse in judgment. It was abandonment. Documented. Witnessed. Ruled upon. David walked me out of the courthouse into November air that felt shockingly cold after the stale warmth inside. This is good, Jordan. This is what we wanted. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. He handed me a folder with copies of the court order. Keep these safe. Give a copy to Emma's pediatrician, to your work, to anyone who needs to verify your legal authority. And Jordan, prepare yourself. Your parents will receive this order. They're going to call. He was right. They called that evening. Both of them on a 3-way call, their voices tinny through the international connection. My mother spoke first, her voice tight with controlled anger. Jordan, we just received the most humiliating legal document. A court order? You took us to court? Your own parents. I was sitting on my balcony, watching the sun set over the mountains, Emma asleep inside. I'd known this call was coming. I'd rehearsed responses. But now that it was happening, all my prepared words felt useless. You left me no choice, I said quietly. I left you no choice? My mother's voice rose. We left you with your niece for a few weeks, and you respond by dragging us to court? Do you know how this looks? Do you know what people will think? There it was. The real concern. Not Emma's well-being. Not my sacrifice. Not their abandonment. But what people would think. Mom, you left Emma on my doorstep without asking. You've been gone for 2 months. You've provided zero support. What did you expect me to do? My father's voice cut in, deeper and harder than my mother's. We expected you to be family. We expected you to understand that we needed a break. 30 years we've given to this family, Jordan. 30 years of sacrifice. And the one time we ask for something, you betray us. Betray. That word hung in the air between us, heavy and accusatory. I didn't betray you, I said, fighting to keep my voice level. I protected Emma. There's a difference. My mother made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. Protected her from what? From family? From people who love her? You've poisoned this whole situation. The court order says abandonment. Abandonment. That's not what this was. I closed my eyes. Then what was it, Mom? You left an 8-month-old baby with me without asking, without providing support, without a return date. You ignored my calls. You deflected my texts. What word would you use? Silence. Long enough that I thought they might have hung up. Then my father spoke. His voice cold in a way I'd never heard before. We'll be back for Thanksgiving. We'll straighten this out then. And Jordan, you've made this much harder than it needed to be. They hung up. I sat there holding my phone, watching the city lights begin to flicker on below. The mountains were dark silhouettes against a purple sky. Somewhere in that view was my life before September 15th. Before the note. Before Emma. Before I understood that family could be both the people you love most and the people who hurt you deepest. Inside, Emma started crying, that particular cry that meant she'd woken up disoriented. I stood and went to her. She was standing in her crib, tears on her cheeks, arms reaching up. The moment she saw me, her face transformed. Relief. Recognition. Trust. I picked her up and held her close, feeling her heartbeat against mine. It's okay, I whispered. I've got you. I've got you. She laid her head on my shoulder and sighed, that deep shuddering breath babies make when they're settling down. Within minutes she was calm, playing with my hair, babbling softly. To her I was safety. I was home. I was the person who came when she called. The next 2 weeks passed in a strange limbo. I had the court order, which meant I could finally update Emma's information at the pediatrician's office, could enroll her in the infant care program at the hospital's child care center, could make decisions without that constant fear of overstepping invisible boundaries. But I also had the knowledge that my parents were coming back. That Thanksgiving was approaching like a deadline. That whatever temporary peace I'd found was about to be shattered. At work, people started treating me differently. Word had spread about the court case. Some people were supportive, bringing me coffee and asking how Emma was doing. Others avoided me like family drama was contagious. One of the older nurses, a woman named Margaret who'd worked in pediatrics for 30 years, pulled me aside one day. I heard about your situation, she said. My sister went through something similar. Ended up raising her brother's 3 kids. Nearly destroyed her marriage, her finances, everything. She paused, looking at me with something like pity. But those kids are adults now. They call her mom. They visit her on holidays. Her brother barely speaks to her, but she says it was worth it. I hope that helps. Did and it didn't. Hope and warning wrapped together. Nina came over the weekend before Thanksgiving to help me prepare. Not prepare food, prepare mentally. They're going to try to make you the villain, she said, folding Emma's laundry while Emma played on the floor. They're going to twist this into a story where you're the problem. You need to be ready for that. I watched Emma stack blocks, knock them down, laugh at the crash, start again. I know what they're going to say. That I overreacted. That I was jealous of their retirement. That I wanted to steal Emma. That I'm bitter and vindictive and broke up the family. Nina pointed at me with a tiny sock. And what's the truth? I thought about it. The truth is I did what they should have done. I showed up. I stayed. I sacrificed. And they can't forgive me for making their abandonment visible. Thanksgiving arrived with the first real snow of the season. I'd agreed to host dinner at my apartment, which felt insane but also necessary. Neutral territory. My space. My rules. I'd spent the previous day cooking, Emma strapped to my back in a carrier, the two of us moving through the kitchen like a slightly chaotic dance. Turkey breasts because I couldn't fit a whole turkey in my small oven. Mashed potatoes. Green beans. Rolls from the bakery down the street. A pumpkin pie that I'd definitely overbaked but would serve anyway. At 3 o'clock my parents arrived. I heard them in the hallway before they knocked. My mother's voice saying something I couldn't make out, my father's deeper rumble in response. I opened the door before they could knock. We stood there looking at each other across my threshold. My mother had a tan. My father looked relaxed in a way I'd never seen. 2 months in Hawaii had been good to them. They looked like people who'd shed a burden. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. They entered slowly, looking around my apartment like it was unfamiliar territory. My mother's eyes went immediately to Emma, who was in her high chair, smashing pieces of banana with intense concentration. "Oh, Emma," my mother breathed, moving toward her. "Look how big you've gotten." Emma looked up, studied my mother's face, and then looked at me with an expression that clearly asked, "Who is this person?" My mother's smile faltered. "She doesn't remember me." There was hurt in her voice, genuine hurt. "Mom, you've been gone for over 2 months. She's 8 months old. Her memory doesn't work like that yet." My father set down a bag he'd been carrying. I noticed it was from an expensive Hawaiian gift shop. "We brought presents," he said. "For Emma. And for you. As a thank you." Thank you. As if presents could balance the equation. As if a bag of gifts from Hawaii could somehow equal 2 months of my life. For $1,000, my career on pause, my savings depleted. My entire existence reorganized around a child they'd left behind like forgotten luggage. I looked at that bag and felt nothing. No gratitude. No warmth. Just a kind of hollow recognition that we were speaking entirely different languages while using the same words. We sat down to dinner with the kind of careful politeness usually reserved for strangers or enemies. My mother helped herself to turkey and kept glancing at Emma, who was now in a bouncer seat nearby, chewing on a rubber giraffe. My father asked about the weather, about my drive to work, about meaningless surface things that avoided the crater in the middle of the room. I let them do it for exactly 15 minutes. Then I set down my fork with enough force that it clinked against the plate, sharp and final. "We need to talk about what happens next," I said. My mother looked up, her expression already defensive. "Jordan, can't we just enjoy the holiday? We just got back. We're tired from the flight." I kept my voice level but firm. "You've been gone for 9 weeks. Emma is 9 months old today. I have legal guardianship because you abandoned her. We're not pretending this is a normal Thanksgiving." My father's jaw tightened in that way it did when he was about to deliver a lecture. "We didn't abandon her. We left her with family. There's a significant difference." I pulled out the court order from the folder I'd placed on the side table earlier, knowing this moment would come. I slid it across the table toward them. "Judge Morrison disagrees. The order specifically uses the word abandonment. It's a legal finding based on facts. You left an infant without consent, without adequate resources, without a return date, and without maintaining appropriate contact. That's the legal definition of abandonment." My mother's face went pale as she scanned the document. "This is mortifying. Everyone will know about this now. The family, the neighbors, your father's business associates." There it was again. The concern about appearance, about reputation, about what other people would think. Never about Emma. Never about what they'd done to me. Never about taking actual responsibility. "Mom, I don't care who knows. What I care about is Emma's well-being and establishing clear expectations going forward." My father pushed the document back toward me without reading it. "Fine. We're back now. We'll take Emma home with us. Problem solved. You can return to your normal life." The presumption in that statement took my breath away. The absolute certainty that they could simply reclaim her, that their presence erased their absence, that I would hand her over without question because that's what I'd always done. Given in. Made it easy. Smooth things over. No, I said. The word came out stronger than I expected. My parents both looked at me like I'd spoken in a foreign language. No, my father repeated. Jordan, she's not your child. You're her aunt. We're her legal guardians. We have rights. I pulled out another document from my folder. This one I'd prepared specifically for this conversation with David's help. Actually, you're not her legal guardians anymore. I am. The court granted me emergency temporary guardianship. Emma stays with me until the follow-up hearing in January, where a judge will determine long-term custody arrangements. You don't get to just take her back. My mother's hand went to her throat. You can't be serious. You're keeping her from us? From her own grandparents? The accusation hung there, thick and ugly. I took a breath and forced myself to stay calm. I'm not keeping her from you. You can visit. You can be involved. But she's not leaving my care until a court decides what's best for her. Because you've proven that you can't be trusted to prioritize her needs over your wants. My father stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. This is insane. Patricia, we're leaving. Get your coat. My mother stood too, but slower. She looked at Emma, who was oblivious to the tension, focused entirely on her giraffe. Jordan, please. Don't do this. She belongs with family. I stood as well, facing them both. I am family. I'm the family who showed up. I'm the family who stayed. I'm the family who sacrificed. And right now, I'm the only family Emma knows. My mother's eyes filled with tears. You've changed. You used to be so sweet, so agreeable. What happened to you? What happened to me? The question felt like an accusation and a revelation simultaneously. What happened was I'd been tested. What happened was I'd reached the limit of how much I could bend before breaking. What happened was I'd finally learned that love without boundaries isn't love. It's just slow self-destruction dressed up as virtue. What happened is I grew up, I said quietly. I stopped prioritizing your comfort over Emma's safety. I stopped pretending that family obligation means accepting whatever treatment people give me. I stopped being the person everyone could rely on to never say no. My father pointed at me, his finger shaking slightly. You're going to regret this. When this goes to court, when your brother finds out what you've done, when everyone knows how you've torn this family apart, you'll regret it. They left without eating, without taking the gifts they'd brought, without holding Emma even once. The door closed behind them with a finality that felt like punctuation at the end of a very long sentence. I stood in my apartment, surrounded by the remnants of a Thanksgiving dinner no one had eaten, and felt something unexpected. Not sadness. Not regret. Relief. Pure, uncomplicated relief that I'd finally said the things I needed to say. That I'd finally drawn the line I should have drawn years ago. Emma started fussing, tired from all the activity and voices. I picked her up and carried her to the window. Snow was falling steadily now, coating the city in white. It's just us, I told her softly. And that's okay. That's enough. She laid her head on my shoulder, and I felt her body relax against mine. Trust. Complete trust. That's what I'd earned over 9 months. That's what my parents had forfeited. The next few weeks were strangely peaceful. My parents didn't call. I didn't reach out. The silence felt like a buffer, a necessary space to breathe. I returned to work part-time. Emma enrolled in the hospital's childcare program. My coworkers got used to seeing me drop her off in the morning, her diaper bag covered in cheerful animals, her smile lighting up when she saw the other babies. Dr. Walsh checked in regularly, making sure I was managing. The hospital had been surprisingly supportive, accommodating my modified schedule, understanding that my situation was complicated and ongoing. Emma continued to develop at lightning speed. She took her first steps 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, letting go of the couch and toddling 3 wobbly steps into my arms before falling on her bottom and laughing. I cried like she'd won an Olympic medal. I took so many videos that my phone storage filled up, and I had to delete apps to make room. Every milestone felt monumental, not just because they were impressive but because I was there for them. I was the person witnessing her growth, supporting her attempts, celebrating her successes. Nina came over often, bringing her own kids, letting them play with Emma in the controlled chaos that is multiple toddlers in one space. One evening after her kids had been picked up by her husband, Nina and I sat on my couch while Emma played nearby. You know what I've noticed? Nina said. You seem happier. Even with everything being so hard, you seem more like yourself than you have in years. I thought about that. Was I happier? My life was objectively more difficult, more expensive, more exhausting, more uncertain. But there was also something clarifying about it. Something honest. I wasn't performing the role of the good daughter, the reliable sister, the person who absorbed everyone else's chaos without complaint. I was just being Jordan. Tired, overwhelmed, sometimes resentful, but also genuinely present. Genuinely committed. Genuinely living according to values I'd always claimed to have but rarely had to test. I think I feel more real, I said finally. Like I'm not pretending anymore. Not pretending I'm fine with how my family treats me. Not pretending that sacrifice without acknowledgement is noble. Not pretending that I don't have limits. Nina nodded. That's growth. Painful, messy growth. But growth. December brought the kind of cold that makes Denver feel like it's located somewhere much farther north. The mountains were covered in snow, the ski resorts opened, and the city took on that particular holiday energy that's equal parts festive and frantic. I bought Emma's first Christmas presents, wrapping them carefully even though she'd just tear the paper off. I put up a small tree in the corner of my living room, keeping the ornaments high enough that curious grabbing hands couldn't reach them. I took Emma to see holiday lights. Bundled in so many layers she looked like a tiny marshmallow. She was fascinated by the colors, the movement, the brightness of it all. On December 15th, exactly 3 months after my parents had left Emma on my doorstep, I received a certified letter. It was from a law firm in Boulder. My parents had retained an attorney. They were contesting my guardianship. They were petitioning for immediate return of Emma to their care, claiming that I had manipulated the legal system, that they had never intended to be gone long-term, that their absence was temporary and had been misconstrued. They were also requesting that I be investigated for potential kidnapping charges. I read the letter 3 times before my hands started shaking. Kidnapping. They were accusing me of kidnapping the child they'd abandoned on my doorstep. The audacity of it, the complete inversion of reality, would have been impressive if it wasn't so devastating. I called David immediately. He'd been expecting this. Jordan, take a breath. This is an intimidation tactic. They have no grounds for kidnapping charges. You have documented evidence of their abandonment. The court already ruled in your favor. This is them trying to scare you into backing down. But it was working. I was scared. Not of the legal aspects necessarily, but of the emotional warfare ahead. Of the family stories that would be told and retold, each version painting me as more villainous. Of the potential for Tyler to suddenly reappear, angry and accusatory. Another voice added to the chorus against me. Of standing alone against people who were supposed to love me unconditionally but apparently couldn't love me at all once I stopped being convenient. What do? I asked David. You keep doing exactly what you've been doing. You document everything. You maintain your routine with Emma. You don't engage with their provocations. And you trust that the truth is on your side. The truth. That slippery thing that looked different depending on who was telling the story. In my parents' version, they were loving grandparents who'd taken a well-deserved vacation and returned to find their daughter had stolen their grandchild and turned the law against them. In my version, they were irresponsible adults who'd abandoned an infant and were now facing consequences they'd never expected. Both versions used the same facts. Both versions claimed the moral high ground. But only one version centered Emma's needs. Only one version asked what was best for a 9-month-old who hadn't chosen any of this. Christmas came and went quietly. Just Emma and me. I made cinnamon rolls for breakfast because that's what my mother used to do. And some traditions are worth keeping even when the people who taught them to you have become strangers. Emma opened her presents with enthusiastic confusion, more interested in the wrapping paper than the actual toys. I took pictures of everything, knowing that someday she might want to know about this first Christmas, this strange season when it was just the two of us against the world. Nina's family invited us for Christmas dinner. Her house was loud and warm and full of the kind of chaos that comes from too many people in too small a space. Her kids fought over toys and her husband burned the rolls and her mother-in-law made passive-aggressive comments about the turkey being dry. It was gloriously messily normal. Emma fell asleep in my arms before dessert, exhausted from all the activity and attention. Nina walked me to my car afterward, helping me carry Emma's diaper bag and the leftovers she'd insisted I take home. "You're going to be okay," she said, hugging me carefully so as not to wake Emma. "Whatever happens in court, whatever your family does, you're going to be okay." I wanted to believe her. The January hearing arrived with the kind of bitter cold that makes your lungs hurt. I dressed Emma in her nicest outfit, a little dress with tights that she immediately tried to pull off. Mrs. Henderson watched her during the hearing, having become our regular babysitter and honorary grandmother. The courtroom was the same as before, but this time both tables were occupied. My parents sat with their attorney, a sharp-looking woman in an expensive suit who exuded the kind of confidence that comes from winning frequently. My mother wore pearls and a navy dress that screamed respectability. My father wore a suit I'd never seen before, probably purchased specifically for this appearance. They didn't look at me. Judge Morrison entered and we all stood. She settled into her seat and surveyed both sides with the expression of someone deeply tired of family disputes. "Let's proceed. This is the follow-up hearing for case number 24-7392. I've reviewed the petition filed by the respondents contesting the emergency guardianship order. Mrs. Sullivan, you may present your client's position." The attorney stood, and her voice was smooth and practiced. She painted a picture of devoted grandparents who'd taken a brief, planned vacation after decades of family service. She described their shock at returning to find their access to their grandchild blocked by a well-meaning but misguided niece who'd overstepped her bounds. She presented their regular employment, their stable home, their previous involvement in Emma's life before they'd left. She made them sound like victims of circumstance and an overzealous family member who'd weaponized the legal system. It was a masterful performance. If I hadn't lived through the actual events, I might have believed it. When she finished, Judge Morrison turned to David. "Mr. Hoffman, your response?" David stood and methodically dismantled every claim. He presented the timeline, specific dates and times of my attempts to contact my parents. He showed the minimal responses I'd received. He highlighted the lack of financial support, the failure to arrange proper care before leaving, the absence of any indication they'd be gone for more than a few days. He presented my employment records showing the impact on my career, my financial records showing the expense, my testimony from the first hearing about finding Emma on my doorstep. He presented Emma's pediatric records showing consistent, excellent care under my guardianship. He presented statements from my employer, from Nina, from Mrs. Henderson, all attesting to my dedication and competence as Emma's caregiver. When he finished, Judge Morrison looked at my parents. "Mr. and Mrs. Blake, I'm going to ask you directly. When you left Emma with your daughter on September 15th, what was your intended length of absence?" My mother spoke first, her voice quavering slightly. "We thought it would be a week, maybe 2. We'd been under so much stress with Tyler's situation and helping with Emma. We just needed a short break." Judge Morrison made a note. "And did you communicate this time frame to Jordan?" Silence. My father cleared his throat. "We assumed she understood. She's always been so capable with children. We trusted her to manage." The judge's eyebrow raised slightly. "You assumed. You didn't ask permission. You didn't arrange financial support. You didn't leave adequate supplies. You didn't maintain regular contact. You assumed." My father shifted uncomfortably. "We were trying to give her space. We didn't want to micromanage." Judge Morrison turned her attention to me. "Ms. Blake, I'd like to hear from you. How has Emma's care been over the past 4 months?" I stood steadier this time. "Emma is thriving, Your Honor. She's hitting all her developmental milestones. She's healthy, happy, well-adjusted. She's enrolled in the hospital's childcare program where I work. She has a routine, stability, consistent care. She knows me. She trusts me. I'm not saying my parents can't be part of her life, but I am saying that they've proven they can't be her primary caregivers. They abandoned her once. What's to stop them from doing it again?" My mother made a sound of protest, but Judge Morrison held up her hand. "Mrs. Blake, you'll have your chance to respond." She turned back to me. "What are you asking for, Ms. Blake?" This was the moment David and I had prepared for. The moment where I had to articulate what I wanted. knowing it would permanently alter my relationship with my parents. I'm asking for full legal custody of Emma, Your Honor. Not temporary guardianship. Full custody. With visitation rights for my parents if they choose to exercise them, but with Emma remaining in my primary care. I'm prepared to raise her. I've been raising her. And I'm asking the court to recognize that and make it permanent. The courtroom went very quiet. My mother started crying softly. My father's face went red. Their attorney stood to object, but Judge Morrison held up her hand again. I'm going to take a recess. 1 hour. When we return, I'll hear closing statements and issue my ruling. Everyone please remain available. The recess felt like it lasted days instead of an hour. David and I sat in the hallway. I couldn't eat the sandwich he'd brought. I couldn't do anything except replay the hearing in my mind, analyzing every word, every expression, trying to predict which way Judge Morrison would rule. At exactly 2 o'clock, we returned to the courtroom. Judge Morrison looked exhausted in a way that made me think she'd spent the recess reading and rereading everything, trying to find a solution that wouldn't devastate someone. But in cases like this, devastation is inevitable. Someone's hopes are going to be crushed. I've made my decision, she said without preamble. This case presents a difficult situation where good intentions on multiple sides have led to significant harm. However, my primary concern is not the feelings of the adults in this room. My primary concern is the welfare of Emma Blake. She looked at my parents. Mr. and Mrs. Blake, your actions in September were, at best, profoundly irresponsible. You left an infant without obtaining clear consent from her caregiver. You failed to provide adequate support. You remained out of contact despite numerous attempts to reach you. Whether you intended to be gone for 1 week or 10 weeks is irrelevant. What matters is that you left without establishing appropriate care arrangements, and a child suffered the consequences of your poor judgment. My mother was crying openly now. My father stared straight ahead. Judge Morrison continued. Ms. Blake, you were put in an impossible situation and responded with remarkable competence and dedication. However, your decision to seek guardianship rather than immediately reporting the abandonment complicated matters. I understand your reasoning, but it did create legal ambiguity. She paused, and I felt my heart hammering against my ribs. That being said, Emma has been in your care for 4 months. 4 months during a critical developmental period. You are her primary attachment figure. You have provided stable, consistent, high-quality care. Removing her from your care now would be traumatic and not in her best interest. I heard the words but couldn't quite process them. Judge Morrison looked directly at me. I'm granting your petition for full legal custody of Emma Blake, effective immediately. The respondents, Robert and Patricia Blake, will have supervised visitation rights, 2 hours per week, to be scheduled at your discretion. After 6 months of consistent visitation, we can revisit whether to modify those terms. The courtroom seemed to tilt. I heard my mother's sob, my father's angry whisper to their attorney, David's quiet words of congratulation. But mostly I heard my own heartbeat loud and insistent, reminding me I was alive, I was here. I had just become Emma's legal mother. Not her aunt. Her mother. Judge Morrison wasn't finished. I'm also ordering that Tyler Blake be located and his parental rights be evaluated. If he wishes to contest this custody arrangement, he'll need to appear and demonstrate his fitness as a parent. Until then, Ms. Blake has full custody and decision-making authority. She signed the order with the same efficient strokes as before. Ms. Blake, this is an enormous responsibility. You're young. This will impact your career, your personal life, your future in ways you may not fully anticipate. But based on everything I've seen, I believe you're capable of providing Emma with the stable, loving home she deserves. Don't prove me wrong. I managed to say thank you, though my voice was barely audible. My parents left immediately, not looking at me, their attorney following with a briefcase full of useless arguments. David shook my hand, then pulled me into a brief hug. You did it, Jordan. You actually did it. I walked out of that courtroom into January cold that felt shockingly refreshing. The sky was that brilliant blue that only happens after snowstorms, the mountains sharp and clear in the distance. I got in my car and drove back to my apartment, where Mrs. Henderson was waiting with Emma. When I walked in, Emma was on the floor playing with blocks. She looked up, saw me, and her face transformed into pure joy. She pulled herself up using the couch and toddled toward me with her arms out, that unmistakable gesture of a child who wants to be held by her person. I picked her up and held her close, breathing in her familiar scent. "Hey baby girl," I whispered. "It's official now. You're mine. I'm yours. We're family." Mrs. Henderson was beaming. "I take it things went well?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. She gathered her things, squeezed my shoulder as she passed, and left us alone. I sat on the couch with Emma in my lap. She was babbling, telling me something in her baby language that I didn't understand but loved hearing anyway. I thought about the person I'd been 4 months ago. The person who said yes to everything because no felt selfish. The person who bent herself into impossible shapes to accommodate other people's comfort. The person who believed that sacrifice without reciprocation was noble. That person had been good, kind, reliable. But that person had also been slowly disappearing, eroded by other people's expectations until there was almost nothing left. This person, the one sitting here with a 9-month-old in her lap and a court order granting full custody, this person was different. Tired, uncertain, often overwhelmed but also solid. Real. Clear about her boundaries and her values. Clear that love without respect is just control wearing a prettier name. Spring came eventually, as it always does in Colorado, dramatic and sudden. One day there was snow, the next day tulips were pushing through the ground. Emma turned 1 in May. I threw her a party at a park, inviting Nina's family, Mrs. Henderson, a few colleagues from work who'd become genuine friends through this process. I didn't invite my parents. They'd exercised their visitation rights exactly twice, awkward 2-hour sessions at a neutral location where they held Emma stiffly, and she squirmed to get back to me. After the second visit, my mother called to say they'd decided to move back to Hawaii. Permanently. They'd sold their house in Boulder. They were done with Colorado winters, done with family drama, done with trying to maintain relationships that had become too complicated. She didn't apologize. She didn't ask about Emma's development. She just informed me of their decision like she was updating me about a change in their phone plan. I felt nothing when she said it. Not sadness. Not relief. Just acceptance. Some people leave and that's okay. Some relationships end and that's okay too. Emma would grow up without her grandparents actively involved, but she'd grow up knowing she was wanted, knowing she was chosen, knowing that the person raising her had fought for her, not because it was easy but because it was right. Tyler never surfaced. His parental rights were eventually terminated after he failed to respond to multiple court summons. I didn't know where he was. I didn't know if he was okay. Some part of me would always worry about my brother, would always hope he'd get his life together. But I couldn't fix him. I couldn't save him. I could only save the child he'd left behind. At Emma's birthday party, she took her first unassisted steps in front of everyone. She toddled from Nina to me about 6 feet, her face serious with concentration. When she made it into my arms, everyone cheered. She looked around at all the smiling faces, at the decorations and the cake and the presents, and she laughed that beautiful toddler laugh that sounds like pure happiness. Nina came over after everyone left, helping me clean up while Emma napped, exhausted from all the excitement. "You know what I realized today?" Nina said, tying up a trash bag full of wrapping paper. "Emma has no idea her life could have been different. To her this is just normal. You're her mom. This apartment is her home. This is her life. And it's a good life." She was right. Emma would grow up with the story I chose to tell her. A story where people made mistakes, where systems were complicated, where families sometimes failed but where love ultimately showed up. A story where her aunt became her mother not because biology dictated it but because commitment did. I started a savings account for her therapy, because no matter how good my intentions, growing up with this origin story would require processing. I documented everything in journals, writing down memories while they were fresh, so that someday when she asked questions I'd have answers. I took photos constantly, building a visual record of a childhood that was normal and mundane and occasionally magical. My career eventually stabilized. I moved to a larger apartment, still in Capitol Hill, but with an actual second bedroom and a small yard where Emma could play. I dated briefly, then stopped when I realized I didn't have the emotional capacity for it yet. Maybe someday. Maybe when Emma was older and my life felt less like controlled chaos. Or maybe not. Maybe being a single parent was enough for me. Work continued, the steady rhythm of pediatric nursing, helping other families navigate medical crises and childhood illnesses. Sometimes I saw parents who reminded me of my own, prioritizing convenience over care. Sometimes I saw parents who were trying so hard but failing anyway. I developed more compassion for how difficult it all was, how easy it was to make catastrophic mistakes while believing you were doing your best. But I also developed clearer boundaries. I reported suspected neglect without hesitation. I documented concerns thoroughly. I advocated fiercely for children who couldn't advocate for themselves. One evening the following December, a year and 3 months after that note appeared on my door, I was giving Emma a bath. She was splashing and laughing, her hair standing up in soapy spikes. She looked up at me and said clearly, "Mama." Not the babbled mama from earlier. A real word. Directed at me. Claiming me. I felt tears spring to my eyes, unexpected and overwhelming. "That's right, baby. I'm your mama." She went back to splashing, the moment already forgotten for her. But I stood there holding a washcloth, crying over a bathtub because sometimes the weight of what you've taken on hits you all at once. Not the burden of it. The privilege. The absolute privilege of being the person this child calls mama. Of being trusted with her care, her growth, her heart. Of being chosen by circumstance and court order and commitment to be the one who shows up day after day after day. Later, after Emma was asleep, I sat on my balcony wrapped in a blanket, watching snow fall over the city. Denver looked beautiful under fresh snow. All the rough edges softened, all the noise muffled. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I almost deleted it, but something made me open it. It was Tyler. "Heard you have Emma. Heard Mom and Dad moved away. Guess you won. Hope you're happy." I stared at that message for a long time, trying to decide if I should respond. Trying to decide if there was anything to say to someone who'd been absent for his daughter's entire first year, who reduced a complex situation to winning and losing, who couldn't even ask how his child was doing. I typed and deleted several responses. Finally, I sent just one line. "She's doing great. She's happy and healthy and loved. That's all that matters." He didn't respond. I didn't expect him to. I turned off my phone and went inside. Emma was sleeping in her crib, one arm thrown over her head, her breathing deep and even. I stood in her doorway watching her sleep, this tiny person who'd completely reorganized my life. This unexpected gift disguised as an obligation. This child who taught me that sometimes the right choice is the hardest one. That boundaries aren't cruel, they're essential. That you can't save everyone, but you can save the one person in front of you who needs saving most. Outside, snow continued to fall. Inside, Emma slept and I kept watch the way I would for years to come. Not because I had to. Not because anyone forced me. But because on September 15th I'd made a choice. I'd picked up that car seat and brought her inside. And everything that followed, all the court hearings and family fractures and sleepless nights and impossible decisions, all of it stemmed from that single moment of choosing presence over convenience. Of choosing her. And I would choose her again every single day for the rest of my life. Because sometimes the hardest rescue isn't pulling someone back from an edge. It's refusing to let their abandonment become your emergency, while still managing to save them anyway. It's understanding that protecting someone you love might mean disappointing everyone else. It's learning that family isn't just who shares your blood. It's who shows up when it costs them everything. Emma stirred in her sleep, made a small sound, then settled again. I pulled her door almost closed, leaving it open just enough that I'd hear her if she woke. Then I walked to my own room, finally ready to sleep, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges and small victories, and the ongoing work of building a life neither of us had planned but both of us deserved. The years moved forward with the particular velocity that comes from raising a child. Time simultaneously crawled during difficult moments and sprinted past milestones you wished would last forever. Emma turned 2, then 3, then 4. Each birthday brought a party, photographs, a height mark on the doorframe that tracked her growth in permanent pencil lines. The apartment we'd moved to when she was 1 eventually felt too small again, and when Emma was 3.5, I bought a small house in the Highlands neighborhood. Nothing extravagant, just a 2-bedroom bungalow with a fenced yard, and an old maple tree perfect for climbing once she got bigger. The mortgage stretched my budget uncomfortably tight, but it was ours. A real home with roots we could sink deep. Work evolved as Emma grew. I'd taken on more administrative responsibilities at the hospital, which meant better hours and slightly better pay. I still worked directly with patients several days a week because I loved that part of nursing too much to give it up entirely, but the balance was better. Sustainable. Nina remained my closest friend, our kids growing up together in that way that makes them feel like cousins even without blood relation. Her oldest daughter became Emma's favorite playmate, and watching them build elaborate block towers and negotiate the complex politics of sharing became one of my unexpected joys. Mrs. Henderson stayed involved too, transitioning from paid babysitter to honorary grandmother who came over for dinner once a week and always brought cookies Emma definitely didn't need but absolutely deserved. The legal battles eventually faded into paperwork filed away in folders I rarely opened. My parents sent a Christmas card the first year they were in Hawaii, nothing after that. The silence was absolute and oddly peaceful. I'd expected to feel grief over losing my family of origin, expected some dramatic mourning period. Instead, I just felt lighter. Like I'd been carrying a backpack full of stones and finally realized I could set it down. Tyler remained a ghost. No contact, no attempts to see Emma, no child support payments despite court orders. I'd hired a lawyer to pursue enforcement initially, but after 6 months of Tyler moving constantly and working under-the-table jobs, we'd given up. The money wasn't worth the energy. Emma would grow up without her biological father, but she wouldn't grow up feeling unwanted. That distinction mattered more than genetics. When Emma started preschool, the intake forms asked for parent information. I filled them out with my name in both parent slots, marked myself as single mother, and felt nothing but honest. The teacher, a warm woman named Miss Patricia with gray hair and laugh lines, never asked invasive questions. She treated our family configuration as completely normal, which helped Emma treat it that way too. At 4 years old, Emma was bright and curious with an independent streak that occasionally frustrated me but mostly made me proud. She asked endless questions about everything. Why is the sky blue? Where do squirrels sleep? Why can't we have ice cream for breakfast? I answered as honestly as I could, looked up what I didn't know, and tried to model that not knowing something was just an opportunity to learn rather than a failure. The first time Emma asked about her family situation, she was 4.5. We were in the car driving home from the grocery store when she said from her car seat in the back, "Mama, why don't I have a daddy?" I'd prepared for this question. I'd read books about how to discuss complex family situations with young children. I'd rehearsed various versions of the conversation. But actually hearing her small voice ask it made all my preparation feel inadequate. I pulled into our driveway and turned off the car so I could give her my full attention. I twisted in my seat to look at her. "You do have a daddy," I said carefully. "His name is Tyler. He's my brother, which makes him your dad. But he wasn't ready to be a parent when you were born, so I became your mom instead." Emma considered this with the seriousness she brought to all important topics. "Where is he?" she asked. I chose honesty. "I don't know, sweetie. He moves around a lot. But wherever he is, I hope he's okay." She nodded like this made perfect sense. "Do I have a mommy who's not you?" This question hurt more than I expected. "You had a birth mom named Vanessa who carried you in her tummy and helped you be born. But she also wasn't ready to be a parent. So I'm your mom now. The mom who takes care of you and loves you and will always be here." Emma was quiet for a moment, her little face thoughtful. Then she said, "Okay, can we have the cookies now?" And just like that, the profound became mundane. We went inside and had cookies and played with her dolls, and the conversation didn't come up again for months. But I knew it would resurface. Questions like that don't get answered once. They get answered in layers over years as children develop the capacity to understand more complex truths. When Emma was 5, she started kindergarten at the neighborhood elementary school. The building was old but well maintained, with brightly colored murals painted by previous students and a playground that had been recently updated. Her teacher, Mr. Raymond, was young and energetic, the kind of teacher who did voices when reading stories and came up with elaborate science experiments that were really just excuses to make messes. Emma thrived. Parent-teacher conferences that first semester revealed what I already knew. Emma was academically ahead, socially confident, and occasionally too independent for structured classroom settings. She's a natural leader, Mr. Raymond said diplomatically. She just needs to learn that sometimes leaders need to follow directions too. I tried not to smile, recognizing my own stubborn streak reflected back at me. The other kindergarten parents were a mixed group. Some were friendly, inviting us to playdates and birthday parties. Others kept their distance, whether because of our non-traditional family structure or just general social dynamics. I couldn't tell. I didn't push it. Emma had friends. She was happy. That was enough. One mother, Lauren, became a genuine friend. Her son Jackson was in Emma's class, and the two kids hit it off immediately. Lauren was a single mom too, divorced rather than never married, but we shared enough common ground that conversation came easily. We started doing weekend park trips together, swapping babysitting when one of us needed coverage, texting each other photos of our kids doing absurd things. One Saturday afternoon when the kids were playing in my backyard, Lauren and I sat on the back porch with coffee while they dug holes and made mud pies. "Can I ask you something personal?" Lauren said. I nodded, used to this preface by now. "How do you do it? Work full-time, raise Emma alone, and still seem so together?" "I'm barely holding it together most days, and Jackson's dad still takes him every other weekend. I don't know how you manage with no backup." I laughed, surprised she saw me as together. I'm not as together as I look. My house is a mess most of the time. I feed Emma frozen chicken nuggets at least twice a week. I've cried in my car more times than I can count. But I also learned that perfection isn't the goal. Being present is the goal. Emma doesn't need a perfect parent. She needs a consistent one who shows up and tries. Lauren nodded slowly. Did her dad ever try to come back? To be involved? I shook my head. No. He's been completely absent since before she was born. My parents too. They moved to Hawaii and basically wrote us off. I expected pity or shock, but Lauren just said, "Their loss. Emma's amazing. And you're amazing for choosing her when everyone else chose themselves." That simple statement of fact, delivered without drama or judgment, meant more than she probably realized. For so long, I'd carried the narrative that I'd destroyed my family, that I'd been selfish and cruel and unforgiving. Hearing someone outside the situation clearly state that actually, I'd been the one who showed up when everyone else left, it settled something in me that had been unsettled for years. Emma turned 6, 7, 8. With each year, she became more herself. More opinionated, more funny, more capable. She learned to read and devour books at a pace that required weekly library trips. She took up soccer and discovered she loved the controlled aggression of the sport, the way running and kicking could channel energy productively. She made friends easily and lost them occasionally in the dramatic way of elementary school politics, then made new ones. She was, by any reasonable measure, a normal kid having a normal childhood. But sometimes, late at night after she was asleep, I'd stand in her doorway watching her and marvel at how close we'd come to a completely different outcome. If I'd called the police that first night instead of bringing her inside. If I hadn't fought for guardianship. If I'd backed down when my parents contested custody. If any number of moments had gone differently, Emma might have grown up in foster care, or with grandparents who saw her as a burden, or with a father too unstable to provide safety. The weight of those alternate timelines pressed on me sometimes, the awareness that one person's choice could completely determine a child's trajectory. When Emma was 8, she asked the question I'd been waiting for with a mixture of dread and relief. We were at the kitchen table, her working on math homework, me reviewing patient charts on my laptop. She set down her pencil and looked at me with those blue eyes that still didn't match anyone in my family. "Mama, why did you decide to keep me?" she asked. Not why did you become my mom, which implied I'd always been her mother. But why did you decide to keep me, which acknowledged the choice point. The moment things could have gone differently. I closed my laptop and gave her my full attention. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" She twisted her pencil between her fingers, not quite meeting my eyes. "At school, Madison said I don't have a real family because my dad left and my grandparents don't visit, and you're not my birth mom. She said you just got stuck with me and you're too nice to give me away." The rage I felt toward this Madison child and her casually cruel assessment was immediate and volcanic. But I pushed it down because Emma needed me calm and clear, not angry and defensive. "First," I said, keeping my voice steady, "Madison is wrong. We are a real family. Family isn't about biology. It's about who shows up, who stays, who loves you no matter what. You and me were absolutely a real family. Emma nodded but didn't look convinced. I continued. Second, I wasn't stuck with you. I chose you. There's a difference. When you were a baby, other adults in your life made bad choices. They left when they should have stayed. But I looked at you and decided that you deserved someone who would fight for you. So I did. I fought in court. I fought with my parents. I changed my whole life. Not because I was stuck, but because I wanted to be your mom. Her eyes finally met mine, searching for truth. You wanted me? The vulnerability in that question broke my heart. Emma, I have wanted you every single day since September 15th when I found you on my doorstep. I wanted you when you cried all night and I was so tired I couldn't think straight. I wanted you when I had to learn how to do your hair and failed a dozen times before getting it right. I wanted you when money was tight and I was scared. I wanted you through every hard moment. And I've wanted you through every beautiful moment. You're not a burden. You're not someone I got stuck with. You're my daughter, and being your mom is the best thing I've ever done. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, Can I tell Madison you said that? I laughed despite myself. You can tell Madison whatever you want. But Emma, some people won't understand our family. Some people will say mean things because our story is different. That doesn't make our story wrong. It just makes their understanding limited. She considered this, then went back to her math homework like the conversation had resolved something important. I sat there for a while longer watching her work, feeling the weight and wonder of the responsibility I'd taken on 8 years ago. That night, after Emma was asleep, I pulled out the journals I'd been keeping since she was a baby. Pages and pages of memories, observations, milestones, struggles. I'd written them for her. For someday when she was old enough to want the full story. I added a new entry dated that day, describing her question about being kept, about Madison's cruelty, about the look on her face when I told her I'd chosen her. I wrote about how proud I was of her, how she was growing into someone kind and strong and beautifully herself, how I hoped she'd always know her worth wasn't determined by the people who left, but by the people who stayed. Spring arrived when Emma was almost 9, bringing the particular chaos of end-of-school-year activities and the beginning of soccer season. We'd settled into a rhythm that felt sustainable, even comfortable. Work was good. Emma was thriving. Our house was filled with the particular clutter that comes from a child who's loved and given space to explore interests. Books everywhere. Art supplies taking over the dining room table. Soccer gear by the back door. Evidence of a life being fully lived. One evening in May, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I almost sent it to voicemail, but something made me answer. Jordan. The voice was familiar but wrong somehow, like a song played in the wrong key. This is Tyler. I stood up from the couch where I'd been reading, my body responding to his voice before my mind caught up. Tyler, I said, and it came out flat. I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from. He continued quickly, like he was afraid I'd hang up. But I needed to call. I needed you to know I'm clean. 2 years sober. I have a job, an apartment. I'm in therapy. I'm actually doing okay. I walked into the kitchen away from where Emma was watching television, needing privacy for whatever this conversation was about to become. That's good, Tyler. I'm glad you're doing better. Silence on his end, like he'd expected more enthusiasm or maybe more anger. I want to see Emma, he said finally. I want to meet my daughter. I know I have no right to ask. I know I've been absent. But Jordan, I'm different now. I'm ready to be her dad. The audacity of that statement, the assumption that readiness now erased 9 years of absence, made me grip the phone so hard my knuckles went white. Tyler, Emma is 9 years old. 9. She doesn't know you. She's asked about you, and I've told her the truth, that you weren't ready to be a parent. But that doesn't mean you can just show up now and claim a relationship that doesn't exist. His voice got defensive. I'm her father. Biologically. That has to count for something. I thought about all the nights I'd walked the floor with infant Emma, all the scraped knees I'd bandaged, all the homework I'd helped with, all the soccer games I'd attended, all the bedtime stories, morning routines, difficult conversations, and small daily acts of love that actually constituted parenting. Biology is the beginning, not the relationship, I said carefully. You want to be in Emma's life? Okay. But that happens slowly, carefully, in ways that center her needs instead of your guilt or your desire to feel like a father. And it starts with you understanding that I'm her parent. Not you. Me. He was quiet for so long I thought he'd hung up. Then he said, his voice thick, I know. I know you are. And Jordan, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. For leaving her. For leaving you to handle it all. For being selfish and weak and not showing up when I should have. You deserved better from me. Emma deserved better. I can't undo that, but I want to try to do better now if you'll let me. The apology I'd needed for 9 years but had stopped expecting. It landed with less impact than I'd imagined. Because I'd already done the work of forgiving him not for his benefit but for my own peace. I'd already accepted that he was limited. That his absence was about his capacity, not my worth or Emma's worth. But still, hearing him name it mattered. I need to think about this, I said. I need to talk to Emma. She gets a say in this. She's old enough to have opinions about whether she wants to meet you. And Tyler, if we do this, you don't get to disappear again. You show up consistently or you don't show up at all. I won't let you break her heart. He agreed to everything, promised reliability, swore he understood the stakes. We hung up with a tentative plan to talk again in a week after I'd discussed it with Emma. That night, after Emma was in bed, I sat on my back porch under the maple tree and thought about Tyler's call. Part of me wanted to protect Emma from potential disappointment, to keep her world small and safe and free from people who might hurt her. But another part knew that wasn't fair. Emma deserved the chance to know her biological father if she wanted to, even if that relationship looked different than traditional father-daughter bonds. She deserved agency over her own story. The next morning at breakfast, I brought it up casually. Emma, your dad Tyler called last night. He'd like to meet you if you're interested. She looked up from her cereal, surprised but not as shocked as I expected. My birth dad. I nodded. He's been working on himself. Getting healthier. And he wants to be part of your life if you want that too. But it's completely your choice. You can say no. You can say maybe later. You can say yes. Whatever you decide is okay. Emma ate another spoonful of cereal, thinking. Would he live here? She asked. No. He'd visit. We'd meet somewhere neutral at first, like a park or a restaurant. Baby steps to see if you two get along. She nodded slowly. Will you be there? The fear in that question, the need for my presence as safety net, made my chest tight. Always. For as long as you need me there. Emma thought about it for another moment, then said, Okay. I'll meet him. But Mama, he's not going to be my real dad, right? You're my real parent. I pulled her into a hug. This fierce, brave girl who understood more than I gave her credit for. I'm your parent. That doesn't change no matter who else comes into our lives. You're stuck with me forever. She hugged me back tightly, then pulled away and went back to her cereal like we just discussed weekend plans instead of a potentially life-altering reunion. 2 weeks later, on a Saturday afternoon, Emma and I met Tyler at a park near downtown. I recognized him immediately despite the years, though he looked different. Healthier. His face had filled out, his eyes were clearer, his clothes actually fit properly. He stood near a bench watching us approach with an expression I couldn't quite read. Nervous. Hopeful. Scared. When we got close, he smiled tentatively. Hi, Jordan. Then he looked at Emma. Hi, Emma. I'm Tyler. Emma studied him with the frank assessment children excel at. You look like me, she said finally. The nose. He laughed, surprised and delighted. Yeah, we both got the family nose. I'm sorry about that. They talked for an hour while I sat nearby, close enough to intervene if needed but far enough to give them space. Tyler told Emma about his job as a mechanic, about the city where he lived now, about getting his life back together. Emma told him about school, about soccer, about her friends and her favorite books. It was surface conversation, careful and polite, but it was a beginning. When it was time to leave, Tyler asked if he could see her again. Emma looked at me for permission. I nodded. We can do this again if you want. She turned back to Tyler. Okay, but you have to actually show up. My mama always shows up. If you're going to be in my life, you have to do that too. Tyler's eyes went glassy. I will. I promise I will. Over the following months, Tyler kept his promise. He visited twice a month, always on time, always present. The visits gradually extended from an hour to an afternoon. Emma warmed to him slowly, carefully, never calling him Dad but accepting him as Tyler, someone connected to her who was trying. I watched it all with the careful attention of someone who knew how fragile these new bonds were, ready to step in if Tyler faltered. He didn't falter. He showed up. And slowly, Emma's family expanded to include him in a limited but real way. Life continued its forward momentum. Emma turned 10, then 11. She grew taller, her interests shifted and evolved, her personality became more defined. She remained close with Nina's kids, developed a passion for environmental science, joined the school debate team. She was becoming who she was always meant to be, supported by a family that had been chosen rather than assigned. On the anniversary of that September night when I'd found her on my doorstep, I started a tradition. Every year, Emma and I would make her favorite dinner, then sit together and look through the photo albums I'd been meticulously maintaining. We'd remember where we'd been, how far we'd come, how much we'd grown together. When Emma was 12, going through the photos from her first year, she paused on one of me holding infant Emma in the hospital after her first wellness check. I looked exhausted in the photo, dark circles under my eyes, my hair a mess. But I was smiling. "You look really tired," Emma observed. "I was really tired," I confirmed. "You didn't sleep through the night until you were almost 1. She traced the edge of the photograph with her finger. "But you look happy too." I nodded. I was happy. Exhausted but happy. Because even in those hardest moments, I knew I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Emma looked at me then with eyes that held more understanding than 12-year-olds should need. "Thank you for keeping me. For choosing me when you didn't have to." I pulled her into a hug. This girl who wasn't so little anymore, but would always be my baby. "Emma, I would choose you 1,000 times over. In every version of that night, in every possible outcome, I would always choose you. Being your mom is the greatest privilege of my life." She hugged me back, and we sat there surrounded by photos documenting a journey neither of us had planned but both had committed to with everything we had. Outside, Denver continued its eternal rhythm. Mountains standing sentinel. Snow falling and melting and falling again. Seasons turning. Life moving forward with that particular grace that comes from learning that sometimes the family you build is stronger than the family you're born into. And sometimes the greatest act of love isn't holding on to people who hurt you, but letting them go while protecting the ones who needed you to stay. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.